Hey, it's Don, the Auction Professor. Today we're going to talk about another bolo here, and it's just basically keys. This question was brought up actually by 3 people this week. One person brought it up, and other people were very interested in it as well. And I have actually received an email just on a key that somebody sent me a picture of, so I thought I would address keys in general. For the most part, most keys don't sell very well, but there's a ton that I do look for. We do find some. They don't even have to be functional keys to be worth money. But we're going to hop over to the screen right now, and I'm going to go into some keys and things to look for right this moment. So today we're talking about vintage keys. Now, you're going to see these occasionally, but only if you look in places like we do. Antique auctions, antique malls, some of the live auctions, as I said. Those are main sources for these type of material. Estate sales, of course, I find big giant keys in. The larger they are, the heavier they are. Even steel or brass, they all seem to sell well. This is a specific early example. This wouldn't be something the average person's going to find. I've only had a couple in my entire life that were this old, and one of them I still have. I kept it just because they are that rare. There's books you can track down on these type of items. Mostly you're going to see like auction catalogs to price or date some of these. There are some more modern day books for some of the key collectors, but as a general rule, they're expensive books. They don't show up often. You're just not going to run into them. Your best result on something like this, if you find a bunch, would maybe pay for like Worth Point or something, which I don't personally do. I don't find enough material that I can't ID or can't price to make it worth my time to pay for them. Now, some people, depending on what you sell, Worth Point may be a fully fledged necessity for you, but for me it's not, so I don't worry about it. I would just price them, if it's something like a key, Venetian Gothic key, by what I see on eBay. This one went for $650. And if I'm not sure, I'll price them high and do it as an auction. Very few times do I say an auction, but certain categories are well deserving of auctions in general. Here's an early cut one. I like how the design shape is too at the end. Not in perfect condition. It has some use issues, of course, which you can see down at the end. It's a little worn here and there. Has some major use actually to it. This is typical of this era, 17th century. These you can find in this country. We found them when we lived in Florida, in the St. Augustine area. They show up, and all through New England we found vintage keys. If you're not familiar, 17th century means it's from the 1600s. 18th century means it's from the 1700s. 19th century means it's from the 1800s. People mix that up. They see 17th century and they assume that's 1700s, like 1750. 1750 is 18th century. 1640 is 17th century. So just FYI, just for those who aren't in the know. Not something that a lot of people would pay attention to, but I do because we list in some of these categories. This one went for $379. It's not a huge area. There's only certain types of keys that are worth money. House keys and things like that just aren't. Some blanks are worth some money. There also are keys you cannot legally sell, as well as the blanks you can't legally sell. These would be like bank vault keys and things like that, cash control keys, specific items like that. You can't just sell for the most part. There are some that aren't allowed, so pay attention to what you have. Railroad keys, you're safe. The early cast iron ones we showed you are always safe. Here's just a random lot, $315. These are typically what you see for almost any railroad that I see. They all look pretty much like this. Now, there's different versions of these keys. There might be a Pullman, like cab or door key or something like that that's T-shaped, that has a round opening like that too. There's some that are hex and stuff like that too. Now, here's a group of Greenleaf and Sargent. They're environmental keys, like for things outside, for like light switches or power supply boxes for like sprinklers or something along that line. These are still usable. These would be something someone probably still uses because the equipment is still valid in many cases. $308. And some of these may just be for collectors, but I believe they still use a lot of these keys. They did 10, 15 years ago when I worked in some establishments. Here's a real nice 17th century again. Chiseled. It was probably literally carved out at some point, would be my guess by the description here. Typical key that you will find. I love the old styled key. Some of them are like figural almost, look like people, or this one has vines or a tree at the top, so rather interesting. This one's $291. Most of the skeleton keys I do grab if there's big lots of them. You can still sell those too. They're just cheaper ones. Now this is 14th century. That would mean 1350, 1360, 1300s. You can see just how corroded these are. Somebody could have metal detected these. They could have been found in the ground. They do look old. They do look like they've been around the block for a while. This is what I look for. Again, I'm not going to find these all the time. I'll be lucky to find one every year or two if I'm lucky this old. They do show up, though, believe it or not. You'll have an estate sale, and there'll be a collector of old locks, and that's why these show up. It doesn't have to be something that you would think you would find in this country, even, because people have been collecting for hundreds of years certain items, and they can have them shipped in from overseas. So you will find pieces like this in America as well, too. $247 on those in that condition. Now, here's just another one, Gothic ones. Now, it's hard to tell if you're not into this stuff and you haven't had books and stuff. I metal detected, so I know colonial and stuff. I've looked back into keys. I've researched keys many times because we end up finding them brass or iron or whatever the case may be. These could have been dug and then electrolyzed. Now, you could do electrolysis on actual metal stuff at your house. We've done it. I've talked about this before. I bought Roman coins that were encrusted. You couldn't see what's in them. And then we would electrolysis them. And it's just a simple process, something anybody can do at home, honestly, with very little effort. And it really works great, as long as you don't leave it in there too long. But that's what my guess is on these. They're probably dug, and then somebody cleaned them up. Typical, that's what I see. You know, no big deal. That's not an issue. $245. Another massive one. Now this is 1700s colonial. This is a big one. This is a big, thick around. It would have been for a big door of some kind. This is just what you see back then. This one's $235. Really nice one. I really like this one. This one's impressive to me. Some more Romanesque, Gothic. This looks like it might be a different person. It's hard to say. Again, I would say these are all metal detected. Honestly, that's what I would say. And these do show up. So don't think it's crazy. Metal detectorists do find these. I found keys that are in the 1700s and even early 1800s on many occasions. $233 on these. Here's another railroad key, just to give you some examples. Now, I don't know all the names, but if you Google the JW and NW, you're going to get the name of the company. I'm almost guaranteeing you that's the case. $230. Some of these can go $500, $600 for one key just like this. This is the style of the key I always look for, always. Another one, just another example, $249. I'm not even showing you the most expensive ones. As I said, depending on which category you're looking in, you're going to see these same exact style of keys with just different names for $650, $750, $850. Some even go higher than that if it's a real rare train line. The locks they go on to are all pretty much similar, so the keys all look similar in the most part. It says hollow on that last one. If you're unfamiliar, it's usually hollow down. It's a tube, and it's hollow down there, and the key slides into something, and then that turns the lock. $228, White Pass in Yukon. That would be like up to Canada, the Yukon area, and maybe even into Alaska. So depending on the area, the region, if the railroad wasn't around for a long time, it's defunct for 100 years, it's probably going to be worth more. These go back to the 1800s. Here's just a fab one right here. This one's really unique. I really liked this one. The stylization of it. Now, back when these were made, 17th century, 1600s, somebody probably hand-cut the key and hand-made the lock as well to go with it. So in some cases, it'll be a one-of-a-kind key. Or in other cases, people have used the same pattern over and over again. Here's how I said it's hollow. The tube is hollow, as you see right there. That's typical the railroad keys as well, too. $349 on this one. Here's another one. I'm not sure if this would be called chiseled. Yeah, they say chiseled on here, too. Again, that's probably literally it was carved or cut out, possibly. These may or may not be hollow. This one happens to be. Most of the bigger ones like this are hollow. Really fanciful ones. Sometimes you'll see church ones that have crosses, crucifixes on it. I've seen angels on them. I've had mock keys that were like promotional or advertising that look just fancy. So you've got to pay a little attention to make sure you're not mixing up a real, actual working key with some of the fantasy ones as well, too. $203 on this one. 23 bids. Another railroad key, $515. Again, I'm just throwing a couple other high-priced ones out here. It just depends on the railroad. Denver and Rio Grande. It's not a rare railroad, but the keys at this point are. You find the locks, but maybe not the key. Now here's another oddball one. This is a hollow barrel. This was designed for something else. Signal. Okay, this is a railroad. This is for turning the signal or opening it up, probably for changing bulbs or something. Now some of these have a T-bar at the top, and they're from like Pullman or for like cabinet car door locks and things like that too. It doesn't just have to be padlock locks. There's other things on the train that would have been locked and, you know, needed access. And Pullman is usually one of the more typical ones. But anyway, let's move on. $338 on that one. And we're just going to touch on car keys a little bit. Now, keychains are a different story. There's a ton of early keychains that are worth some money. You might get a vintage Porsche key that you'll get some money out of, or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari key, especially if it has the keychain. But the keychain is going to sell most of those anyway, whether you had the key or not. This one's uncut, so this one's a little different here. It has some wear. Someone might touch it up or even use it for their actual car still to this day, because that's probably just paint. You could just clean it off and then repaint it, and no one would be none the wiser if you're buying it for like a, you know, to use for your old car. And people do that. 55. These are on the small, lower end. I don't mess with too many car keys at all. It's just not worth your time unless you have a huge lot of them, or they're blanks, uncut like this. Any of the Pontiac ones always seem to sell, and there's a ton of fancy ones with Native Americans on them and things like that. This person had a bunch of these, so they must have bought out some defunct gas station or something, and that's where this one came from. But $32, and again, they sold a bunch just like this in the same basic condition. Had the cardboard and the card been in better condition, they might have done better on it. And just the last one, just a figural. There are figural keys too. Maybe not necessarily made by the company itself, but, you know, secondary, third parties and things like that. So that's just a touch on it. This one went for $85. Just pay attention. Again, most keys aren't worth much. Most modern car keys I don't mess with at all. If they're figural or really fancy or have something really unique, if they look like a modern day key, I just wouldn't mess with it at all, unless you get 10,000 of them, say, for $1 or something, or they're like brass keys and it's a ton of weight, because you can scrap the brass for a couple dollars a pound depending on what it's running that specific time. So anyway, that's what I have for you today. Well, there you go. Those are some other items that I look for. Keys in general do sell. They are a highly collected item for some people. Many of the keys that people are looking for are ones they need for something they have, like a cabinet, a car, door locks, or things like that. So I always hang on to them and I always buy them. If they can't be sold individually, you can usually lump them up into a lot and sell them that way. But that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that gave you some ideas and some thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified when I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.